Hello, welcome. Today we're going to have a workshop I'm really excited about. It's healthy aggression. So just as a little backstory, I got certified as a coach before I knew about healthy aggression. And I even remember one client that I really wish I had known more about healthy aggression when I was coaching her, because as coaches, we're really taught, whatever emotions you have, you can find the thoughts that are causing them, and you can just change those thoughts and change the emotions. And that sounds perfect, right? You don't have to feel certain emotions anymore if you just change your thoughts. So she was starting to, she'd actually had some abuse. She'd had therapy for it and stuff. So when I was coaching her, that wasn't our main focus, but she started feeling this, what I would now call healthy aggression towards a man who was being very persistent and, not respecting her boundaries. And I was like trying to coach her out of her anger. And I realize now she was in freeze. She was, pretty defensive and shut down because of her childhood experiences. And that going through this stage of the anger that we normally might repress is actually a way to get out of freeze, to start thawing. So if you think of anger, the emotion of anger, it does have a lot of power. It has a lot of energy. And what they've found is people who go into fight, fight or flight, people who go into fight more, so they have, this anger, they feel like they're going to defend themselves, they suffer less of the chronic pain. And it's a way of moving anger, basically through your body rather than internalizing and having that stuck anger inside of you, so to speak. Right. So when often the people, sorry, I'm just admitting some people. Okay. So often the people who have chronic pain, and like for myself, I'll just tell you how I started. I was raised in a really religious home. And so I think I just internalized the message. I don't think it was ever really taught to me in a time I remember. I think it was just over and over and over, just kind of this idea of like, if you're a good girl, you're not angry, and you shouldn't be angry at people, and it's mean to think mean things about people, and just a lot of messages about anger that I think I just got really good at suppressing it before I even felt it. So when I started learning about anger, I was like, I'm not really an angry person. I'm more sad. But I didn't really resonate with, oh, I have a lot of anger. So what we find again is that back to the fight or flight, I also wanted to tell you, Dr. Schubiner in his book, Unlearn Your Pain, says that fight actually promotes pain reduction. So again, if you think of like you're more mobilized by this fight response, like, oh, I can defend myself, that actually decreases your sense of pain. But when you go into flight, that's more of this fear that you can't do something about. And so it's, more of this fear that is scary and you're helpless. That's when it turns more to pain. So, yeah, as I started learning about anger, I did resonate with being really hard on myself and being frustrated with myself. So that is the one part of anger that I resonated with, was turning anger inward and being angry with myself for not being perfect. But that's not the healthy aggression, anger that we're talking about. Anything that you're turning inward is not going to help you with processing pain. So definitely just notice if you're the type of person. In fact, if you're in the chat, you can just write in there, like, do you resonate with being an angry person? Just drop, what you think about in there. My guess is most of the angry people who think of themselves as angry, they're not in this call because they're not having chronic pain. They have the anger, they express it, they move on, right? Now there's unhealthy ways of expressing it that we don't want to do either. We don't want to, go and hurt people and get in trouble with the law. But in general, I'm guessing, I can't see anything in the chat. If you guys want to, okay. Yeah. So not at all, not feeling angry at all. Did spend 8 years in my 30s being furious. Okay. Yeah. So, yeah, for me, like I said, angry wasn't really something I felt a lot, but if I did, I would turn it inwards. And then another thing that can happen is feeling guilty about feeling angry. So if I did feel angry, then I was like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. Then the guilt and the shame can come in. So that's more what I resonated with, was like turning it inward, feeling bad about it, or just completely subconsciously repressing it, right? So this work was super fascinating for me. And especially if you're, one of okay, let me start over. One of the influences that I started when I was, I started with Sarno. That was like the classic book that someone recommended. And then I found Nicole Sachs, and both of them, they really promote this journaling where you're writing everything unfiltered. And Dr. Sarno really talked about anger a lot, and how that repressed anger is a huge source of chronic pain. And so when I look now at Nicole Sachs' work, I'm like, oh, that makes so much sense. Basically, she's telling you for 20 minutes a day to get really angry and write everything down. So I think, especially for those people who feel like they identify with being in freeze, so it's, like that dissociation or a shutdown response, or, I just don't really feel those things. This can be a healthy process to kind of stir up some of that energy and direct the anger, express it in a therapeutic way, and channel it, I think, into more power to set boundaries or to make changes in your life. And then I kind of feel like for me, I got to this point where I didn't want to write angry things every single day. So for me, I went through a phase of, really cultivating that anger and getting it up and seeing what was there and getting it out and feeling it. And what we want to learn through pain reprocessing therapy is that our sensations aren't dangerous. So if you know that approach, they talk about in The Way Out or Curable or Dr. Schubner's work, we're teaching our bodies and our nervous system that pain isn't dangerous. And what we're doing here with healthy aggression and anger is teaching ourselves, reconditioning ourselves, that normal human emotions are not dangerous. We can feel those emotions. We can express them in healthy ways without actually going and hurting people or saying really cruel things, but we can express them in healthy ways, and it's okay to feel them. We don't need to repress them or feel guilty about that. And then one other interesting thing is that a typical way that you might have been taught to express anger is to like punch your pillow or to yell into your pillow. And they've actually found from research that it does not help. It doesn't help with expressing the emotions in a therapeutic way, because you're like transferring that anger to another object. So today I want to teach you how to, really channel that anger in a way that's healthy and therapeutic and expresses it where you're not, going out and hurting people, or you're not just hitting a pillow and still keeping those hard feelings inside. And the last thing I wanted to say is, this is just my personal experience. I learned about this stuff over the last couple of years and hadn't had a really angry event to put it into practice. But the reason actually I thought of doing this workshop and really found it so important is I just had the most fascinating experience lately over the last month or so, when I had this, this relationship, and not to get into too many details, but I was very hurt at one point and turns out there were some misunderstandings, but my trauma responses came up, right? My survival patterns from wanting to defend myself and protect myself came up. And I started feeling a lot of anger towards this person that, I thought had hurt me. And I let myself really feel that anger. And I let myself really write mean things about him. I didn't write them to him, but I, did some really expressive journaling. And I just noticed that over the, couple days when I was really processing it a lot, it was such a different experience to, when those feelings came up, to allow them, to not make myself wrong, to not justify, oh, it's not that bad. One thing that I particularly do is like, it's like almost weak to have those emotions. Like a better person wouldn't feel that way. And so it was really interesting to be like, it's okay to think this. It's okay to, say these mean things about him in your head. And it was just a totally different experience. It actually brought a lot more compassion to myself. I took some actions that normally I wouldn't take, as far as boundaries and just clarifying things. And, it felt actually different and powerful. So that's why I wanted to share this with you guys. So here's another question for you guys in the chat, if you're able to type in there, or if you want to raise your hand and tell me, but like, what do you think about anger? Just think about, what are your judgments if you have anger, or if someone else has anger? What kind of thoughts do you have about that emotion of anger? Does anyone want to share? You can just type
Yeah, I
in.
will.
Yeah.
I think anger is not very productive.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Not very productive. Yeah. And so there's going to be some resistance to it, right? There's going to be this like, oh, I don't want to feel that. It's not a good thing. Yeah. In some way.
Well, women are bred the acquiescing.
Yeah. True. Very, very good point. Yeah. And Alan wrote in the chat, it scares me. So that's the other thing. Yeah, you can be conditioned to be like, that's really bad. Or you could have witnessed as a child someone who was angry, and for that reason, you never want to feel that emotion because it was so scary to you as a child, and you don't want to get out of control, and right? Yeah. So here's another thing to think about though. When you can express and feel all of your emotions, you actually are able to have more loving relationships. So somehow we think that if we can like push down the anger, or not feel, jealousy, or not feel any of these emotions, then we're going to be a better person. But really what we find is that when people are holding anger in, imagine if you go to some social event and you're kind of seething with anger about someone, but you try to put on a good face and you're being, that people pleaser that many of us are who have chronic pain. It's not like the healthiest relationship with them or the most loving way you could be treating them either, right? Like there is this concept I want you to imagine, and they've actually shown this in research, is that when you are able to healthily in a healthy way express your anger, then you actually become more compassionate. You do become more compassionate towards yourself and even towards other people that you have relationships with. Now, you aren't going to necessarily want to, still have someone who's abusive in your life. And that's where you can take actions from that loving place. But when you're, internalizing the anger, making yourself wrong for it, feeling guilt or shame because you have it, you're really not showing up as the kind of person that you'll want to be in order to have the proper relationships that are healthy and loving. So anger actually helps you have more loving relationships, and to draw those boundaries and change those parts of your life to protect yourself if those loving relationships aren't going to happen with that person. Okay. Yeah. Um,
Yeah,
Rachel.
I find Brene Brown's little thing very useful to me. That boundaries are what's okay with me and what's not okay with me. And in my recent interaction where someone was, in my view, immoral, I just put on a neutral. I go neutral. They're
Mhm.
just not in my life. I don't have to deal
Yeah.
with it. They're not in my reality. They're out. Period.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is a very empowering feeling versus living in fear, ignoring them or hiding from that, right? And
Or
that's why,
smoldering.
or smoldering, right? So you can even see how it makes sense that if you're repressing those things, it's showing up in your body, in your tightness, in your jaw, any of those kind of places. And he actually says, Dr. Schubiner says in this book that it can be a common defense. I'm going to find it and read it. And there are some defenses that start to come up. I'll talk about those right now. When you're getting started and you're not used to feeling anger. And one of them is to develop pain. And so as you're starting to find this anger and feel this healthy aggression, he says, you could tighten with pain in your body. You could feel anxious or upset. You could get dizzy or weak or tired. You might have trouble focusing or lose your train of thought. So I thought that was so interesting, right? Our body can actually be like, oh, you're so foggy with your thinking. You're so tired. You can't do this. So at the physiological level, we may have trained ourselves to repress anger so much that we're going to go into some of these defenses when we start to feel it. The other thing we often go to is to hurt, so we'll just say like, it hurt so much when he said that, instead of he's a jerk for saying that, like he shouldn't have said that. That wasn't nice. It hurt. Or to blame ourselves, it was partly my fault, or I deserved it. We're not going there, right? You can make a case for that. You've probably already done that over and over in your life. When we're trying to cultivate this anger, we're actually trying to feel that feeling in its, raw, true form, and not try to justify the other person's actions or blame ourselves, or even, talk about we should be more loving. If it is someone we love, we might, not want to hurt them. Yeah. Or I've already forgiven them. Right. So just notice as we're talking about anger and we're doing some of these things together, that you might tend to go to some of these defenses, hurt, blaming yourself, or actually developing some physical discomfort around the anger, right? Some physical symptoms. All right. Had a little list. I'm making sure I am getting through all of it. Okay, so now I wanted to have us do a little exercise. It looks like a lot of you have some paper, hopefully some paper and a pen or something that you can write with, because I want us to try a little writing exercise. So writing can be a really therapeutic way, and then I think we'll have time to do a demo. So if you have some paper handy, a pen, it actually is really nice to write instead of just thinking about it. Thinking about it in our head, our brain goes so fast. We have our typical ways of thinking. We only know what's in our conscious mind. We don't have that subconscious awareness. So go ahead and grab paper and a pen. And the first thing you'll do is there are 3 areas that you'll think about, and write down your biggest stressors, or maybe something that does make you angry, if you can think of that. So it would be the areas of like your present life. What's going on today in your world, at your job, or with your relationships, or whatever, that you're stressed about currently. Just all of this, you want to just have it be kind of free association, not really monitoring yourself and editing yourself or crossing things out, just like whatever your brain comes up with, just write those 3 things. And then from your childhood, think about 3 maybe events, or it could be kind of a cumulative, my dad always yelled, or whatever it was, like or it could be a certain, like I was bullied in school, or things that, as you think about your childhood as a whole, come out as like stressful things to you. And then the last section is the personality traits. So these are typical personality traits that people who have chronic pain have. This is from Dr. Sarno, and Schubiner uses this too. So it's like, if you tend to be a people pleaser, that would be a personality trait that you've developed as a coping skill that could be affecting how you're processing emotions, right? You're putting other people's needs above your own. Maybe you're a perfectionist, or you put a lot of pressure on yourself. Maybe you want people to like you. You want to be seen as good. Those are all the types of personality traits that you may resonate with if you have chronic pain or chronic illness or body issues at all. So from those lists, so you have some things in each area. The next part, and we'll just do this for a few minutes, is in the middle of your paper, writing a circle with one of those issues in that circle. So, maybe you choose the one from your childhood that is really on your mind today, or there's something in your current life that, you're really dealing with. So go ahead and put whatever that issue is in the middle of that circle, and you're just going to free associate. So you might think of, my dad yelling or whatever. My dad didn't yell, by the way, but that's just what came to mind. Well, he probably did a few times, and it was scary, right? When I was a kid, he didn't yell much. So when he did, I was super scared. But you put that in there, and then whatever that makes you think of, you write next to it, you draw a circle around it, and you connect the two. It's called webbing. And so then from those two, you could free associate. So the thing I might have thought of was, I felt really scared. And then from my dad yelling and I felt scared, I could write something else that comes to mind. I wanted to be perfect, or whatever it is. And then the webbing can go from there. So you have, as you make these little phrases or words that come to mind, it could be an emotion, it could be a memory, or not a whole paragraph, right? Just like a couple words, and you're just webbing and just free associating. Again, you're not like overthinking it and like, why did I say that? It's just like Fast and the Furious. You're just writing it all down, right? And just letting whatever comes up come up. So we're just going to do that for about 5 minutes. Are there any questions before we do that? I really encourage you to actually do it. It's really, really fascinating. Okay, so I'll give you a few minutes. So go ahead and start with this webbing. Keep going. You're about halfway there. Okay. So hopefully you were able to get a chance to do that. It's different just trying to think about it than actually writing it out. So if you were driving or something when you're listening to this, you could always go back and do this exercise. It's really, really interesting. And then I will have you do one more exercise and then we can get your feedback on how that went for you if you'd like, whoever wants to volunteer. I'm not going to call on you, but if you want to share. So, and yes, there is a recording. Yes, there's a recording from yesterday. Someone is just asking. I realize that's a direct message. Yes. I will make sure and link those for you guys if you're getting my emails. Okay, so what we're going to do now, one more writing exercise. You're going to take something from either that nucleus from the center circle that you did, or another, maybe it jogged another memory for you or something that came up. And this time you're just going to write about the feelings that you have, the angry feelings you have about, that, event or something that's stressing you out. And again, you're not going to turn it towards the anger you feel about yourself, right? Notice when you want to be angry or frustrated with yourself. Look for if you're starting to feel guilty about writing anything about anger or sadness. So go ahead just for a few more minutes. When Dr. Schubiner, he has this book, Unlearn Your Pain, and he has you do this procedure, basically 25 minutes a day. We're going to shorten this part to just 5 minutes instead of 10. But this is kind of the process he actually suggests for unlearning your pain. So go ahead, this time, just free write in sentence form, and you can be angry, and you could even write here, what I want you to think about is what would the anger do or say? So the anger that you're feeling, if that anger could express itself, maybe it would tell that person, stop, don't say rude things to me. That's not nice. Or maybe you even imagine an action that anger would do to stop that person. Now you're not carrying out the action, but you're imagining just if that anger had power to, maybe you were a child that was getting hurt And you imagine that that anger could stop that person from hurting you, what would it do? So go ahead for a few minutes. You can write about an angry event, how the anger feels in your body, if it, what the anger would do, how you would express it. You're about halfway there. So keep writing about the anger, how it feels, who it's directed to, what the anger would do if it could express itself. And look for those defenses of guilt or shame. And finish up what you're writing about. And then I want you to write down on the paper, I'm a person. I deserve to have these feelings. And then write down, I'm relieved to express these feelings. Dr. Schubner has you write it 3 times. In fact, I'm relieved to express these feelings. I'm relieved to express these feelings. I'm relieved to express these feelings. Because what can come up is some guilt or some sadness for the situation or grief. And that's really normal as you express the anger in this healthy way. to have those other emotions as well. And that's when we're expressing the anger, we want to watch out for the guilt and not let ourselves get sidetracked with that. But at this point, now that you've expressed it, maybe there's been some release, and then noticing, like, do I feel guilty for that? You could tell yourself, he has these great phrases I marked. Like it's justified for me to feel this. It makes sense that I feel this. My anger is justified. I didn't deserve that. It's not my fault. I'm a good person. I did nothing wrong. If you don't believe, sometimes we're like, well, I don't really believe that, but you could say, I was doing the best that I could. I was caught in a difficult situation. I was just looking for love. So those kinds of things can help if you're feeling guilt. If you're feeling sadness or grief, I just wanted to be loved. I just wanted you to love me. I was afraid, or I wish things could have been different. So those are the kinds of things you can tell yourself. And then at the very end, you can think of ways to turn this into love towards yourself. So if you had a friend that was going through this same situation and you learned about, someone who had hurt her, or that she felt angry in this situation, how would you, console that person? How would you tell them, like, you're a good person, you're doing the best you could? And you can say that to yourself. I'm a good person. I'm doing the best I can. I love myself. I choose to take time for myself. I deserve to be happy. I'm reading all of these, by the way, from Unlearn Your Pain, Dr. Schubiner's book. And then I think this is from the book, A Mindful Path to Self-Compassion. May I be peaceful and contented. May I be free from harm and illness. May I be loving and loved. May I be forgiving and forgiven. So you can see with the process, we did it in a writing form, a written form, but that process of expressing anger is different than like just punching a pillow and yelling, or going out and actually, hurting someone or sending really mean, spiteful things. So you're expressing it, and then you're showing yourself a lot of love, and you're just noticing those other emotions that come up that are normal, but also you don't want to be hurt again, right? So this is this protective response and feeling. So I'd love to hear some feedback, either in the chat or if someone wants to share. We did those 2 writing exercises. So, maybe one was different for you than the other. Maybe you liked one more, or just anything you want to share about what that process was like for you. I'm curious to hear. Yeah, Rebecca?
I,
Oh, I think I muted you right when you unmuted. Sorry. There we go.
um, I found I was making excuses for their bad behavior. I
Yeah.
would give them a break and say, well, their childhood must have been bad. I was giving them all the excuses,
Yeah. Fascinating.
allowing me to be hurt.
Yeah. 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 It's like we're more comfortable doing that than feeling that anger. Were you able to, actually cultivate some of that anger then and feel it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It
How did
was
it,
like,
how did
it's
it
not,
go? Yeah.
it's,
It's not okay.
that's not okay. I would not have done that to you, and
Yeah.
do that to people. And I wrote 3 pages. So it was,
Awesome. Yeah. Great.
yeah.
Did you know that was in there? Did you know all that anger was in there?
I think I always, I it's like a good person on the shoulder, bad person on the shoulder,
Yeah.
so think those things and then make excuses, and then I would think it again and then make an excuse.
Yes.
And the good person, bad person almost seemed to be like My mother, who, just had her head in the sand and let everything happen and was victim, and then father, who was scary. And so I felt like when I was thinking bad about a person, I'm being my father, and that's not a good person, that's a scary person. So I would flip back over, but I hated being my mother because I thought she was just oblivious. you
Yeah.
know it wasn't real. It was, why even exist if you can't even be real?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure she had so many, right, defenses and trauma
Yeah.
responses, but and we can process it and justify it after, but in the moment when you're cultivating that anger and actually writing about it, it is fascinating to see how much we want to go back to, like, well, it wasn't their fault, and it's not that big of a deal, I deserved it, things like that, versus like, I that was
That-
really hurtful. I
yeah.
didn't deserve that. No one
Yeah.
deserves that.
What kind of parent does that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Or
Yeah.
do that to my kids, how could you do that to me?
Yeah. How did you feel physically? Were there any changes in your body when you were writing or afterwards?
It felt like a letting go. It just kept bubbling forth more,
Yeah.
more, more.
Yeah.
Instead, we all get stuck.
Yeah.
Sometimes, like writing, I'll get stuck and then put it away. This kept bubbling.
Yes. Yeah. And maybe you could go for 10 minutes, right? Like,
Yeah.
he suggests 5 minutes on that circle and the webbing, and then 10 minutes on just free writing, and then noticing, don't go into the guilt or the grief. Write that anger. What would the anger do? Express it. Did you find some of the, like, what would the anger say to her? What would the anger do? Or to
Yes.
him? Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I found myself, which I don't do, but I found myself cussing
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
saying that was effed up. I didn't write it out. I just put F. That was effed up. You're
Yeah.
in. This isn't okay. Stop it.
Yeah.
I don't deserve this. This is not fair. That kept
Yeah.
coming. Isn't
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
right. Not okay. And I found myself when I was writing shaking my head like,
Mm,
no, no.
interesting. Yeah. Like, no, don't do that. Yeah. And one thing he does clarify that I probably didn't clarify, is like, he actually says, you don't have to imagine that it's you saying the thing, it's the anger saying it. I mean, you could imagine you saying it as that child or whatever, but if it's hard for you to, really be like, well, I wouldn't really hit him or something, you're like, what would the anger do? And so he even has, when he takes people through this process, he describes that sometimes they'll, punch them until they're bleeding and they're not breathing. You know what I mean? Like, there's a really expressive way that people can even, like, imagine this violence to get someone to stop. And
Mhm.
then as they, then they feel like this tenderness towards that person. I don't really want to hurt them, and this grief and stuff, but it's like the anger. What would the anger do? What would the anger say? That might help you express it a little more. That if you're like, I don't know why I would say this because it's not me. Yeah, it's not you. It's the anger doing it.
Right.
Yeah.
The webbing,
Yeah.
uh, when you put the
Center
uh,
nucleus one.
yeah, put it in the center. Can
Mhm.
you explain that a little bit more? I think what I did is I put what's happening now,
Uh-huh.
that's me angry, in the center,
Yeah.
and then started bringing up how much that was similar to
Yeah.
um, my mother and my father, and
Yes.
yeah,
That sounds perfect. It's kind of just this free association. And so you make the lists, at first, just to kind of get ideas of what you want to have as your center. You don't have to make the list every day. If you've already made that list, there's a few topics there. But yeah, it could, usually what you'll find is the thing that's going on now, it does remind you of something, and that's what we really get curious about when we start to see those, the webbing branching out of, like, oh, and now I remember this, and he was mean to me and I didn't like, and then you're just really, yeah, getting to that depth.
Nice.
Yeah. So it sounds like you did it perfectly. And
Thank
was
you.
it
Thank you.
interesting?
That was very interesting. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you for sharing a good example. And oh, is someone in the waiting room? Okay. So, okay. Anyone else want to share? I was just trying to find, looks like someone was here. Okay. Any other like experiences that you found interesting or different, or was there anyone who had more pain? Is there anyone that feels like they have more pain now than when they started? Hopefully it was more of a release, but if that does happen, just being super compassionate with yourself. Oh, this must have really been something that was hurtful or serious, or what do you think? Rachel?
I am 70,
Yeah.
and I found it impossible to hang on to anger.
Uh-huh.
I'm the caregiver of my addicted spouse,
Uh-huh.
and I just keep finding it intriguing that if I'm responsible for creating my own reality, why do I have this? And I keep finding out why. I keep finding I'm recreating
Mhm.
my parental relationships,
Yeah.
but I can't get angry about it.
So how was this exercise for you? Were you able to get angry?
Wait, I started out sort of angry.
Yeah.
It's like, damn it, what? How about now? Can we have an interest in being healthy now? Uh,
Oh,
but
uh-huh.
but
Angry at yourself a little there? Or angry at your spouse?
angry at my
Okay.
spouse.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, good. I was I
Yeah,
thought you
angry at
were
my spouse of
okay, good.
42 years. I mean, really,
Yes.
there isn't very many positive outcomes for addiction.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. Like as far as expressing, that it hurts, or I don't deserve this, or, any of these kind of things, were you able to?
Actually, the best part was the last part. I am relieved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You felt some anger release and you felt relieved, or tell me more. What was the relief feeling?
Actually, ambivalent grief comes up for me.
Ambivalent grief. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was interesting. I'm taking a class from Yale in happiness.
Mm-hmm.
And my core strengths, gratitude and forgiveness are in the top 3.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's just just came with the packaging.
Yeah. Yeah. We were like you said, a lot of us were conditioned to be that
Yeah.
way. And
Although in my past, when I had anger, I felt protected.
yes,
That I could be that furious
yes.
nonstop.
Yes. That is, oh, were you the one who wrote, I did have like
Yeah.
8 years where I was furious?
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, finding those nuances of like, it's actually healthy to have some anger. There's this protective response. There are boundaries you can create. There's an energy to it versus just actually repressing those things, justifying it, feeling guilty about it. And so maybe you can start to see how like actually you feeling these feelings, allowing them, expressing them in a healthy way could contribute to a healthier and more loving relationship with that person, whether it's because of boundaries that it's more loving or healthy, but you keeping that anger in or not even
Well, I'm willing to explore
realizing.
anything that will relieve chronic pain.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you're willing. And if I'll just say this too, if if you have one big issue that you're just like really struggling with, you could even start with some smaller issues to kind of get that practice, right? So that, it might feel a little dangerous to have the anger towards this person you're living with. And like, what does that mean? Am I going to have to like, take all these actions in the future? But maybe you could start with, anger about something in middle school where someone teased you or something, right? And then just go from there. The way he suggests it is like every day writing for 25 minutes. So that's pretty intense to like cultivate that anger and those emotions, strong emotions every day. So, do what feels better for you, but that's really what he suggests for unlearning your pain. So pretty fascinating, huh? I am a little curious. Oh, let's see. I thought Shelby might still be on, but maybe she's not. Okay. I know I've had someone who's a client and has worked, she coaches too. And she's like this example in my mind of someone who, the healthy aggression, the anger has really helped her. But I think she might not be on anymore. Okay. Any last questions or comments?
I was
Yeah.
remembering years ago when I also had a 40-year marriage with an addict. And so I went to a lot of courses at our local hospital. And one of them was on the difference between passive, aggressive versus assertive.
Ooh.
So when you're passive, you're the victim. When
Uh-huh.
you're active, you're the perpetrator. When you're assertive, that's the place where you have the healthy anger and the boundary. And this is kind of bringing me back to
Yeah.
that time.
Oh, I love that. What were those three again? I'm going to write those down actually.
Passive
Uh-huh.
is
Oh,
the spectrum where you're the victim.
yeah.
Aggressive is where you're the bully, you're
Yeah.
the perpetrator, but right in the middle is where you find your balance, where you're assertive. You're
Yeah.
not you're not
Yeah.
going to be a bully,
Yeah.
but you're going to make boundaries and you're going to express yourself and you're going to be healthy,
Yeah.
and bringing me back to that place. I
Yeah.
like it.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. And that path to how you're acting, if you're acting in an assertive way, when it involves some of this journaling and some of this imagining, he does the process with someone, and there are many coaches. We can do this with you and walk you through it instead of writing it down. It's okay in those contexts to, just let the anger again, you're thinking of it as the anger is doing the talking. And because at least for me, and I'm assuming it will be very similar for you guys who are not used to expressing anger or feeling it feels really weird and it feels like I shouldn't be doing this and it feels kind of bad. So just there's a difference between what you're thinking and what you're writing and what you're actually doing in real life. So this is a safe way to have those feelings come up, express them, really, be protective of yourself, side with yourself. You don't deserve to be mistreated. You don't deserve to, have hurtful things said to you and to feel fearful around people. So it's okay to, kind of get crass or rude or right. It doesn't mean that's you. It doesn't mean that's how you're going to act towards that person in real life. But letting that page be a place to express it. And, I think at the beginning, Rachel, you were saying like, I don't think anger is productive. So hopefully through this, you're able to see there is something productive about letting these natural feelings that come up as humans be validated, be expressed. You can decide after you release them what you want to do with it, but it is normal if someone hurts you to feel angry. And it's actually good to feel that, process it, let it release, rather than turning it inward and, oh, it's probably just my fault, or, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
So good, you guys. Well, thanks for joining. I actually am repeating this. And since this was my first go around, I didn't know exactly how it would go. So maybe we'll do like a live demo, but this workshop, I was like, I'm going to do it twice because I thought it was the most important one. So tonight we're doing an inner child workshop. And then tomorrow again is healthy aggression. So you can join for that one too, if you want to do this exercise again, or maybe we'll do a live demo.
And what time? There's one tonight,
Yes, that is, what time zone are you?
Pacific.
Okay, so that will be at 4 p.m. Pacific. So it's
Great.
5 Mountain. Yeah.
And I have not received the replays on
Okay.
emails. Will they be?
Yeah, I think it was confusing because I had like a list of people that I was like, oh, sign up here for the replays. But if you're already on my email list, I think today what I'll do is I'll get this replay up and I'll send out the last 2 days and this one together for just the whole email list, not just if you've signed up for the pre-workshop week. Okay.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. Thanks for joining and participating. We'll see you next time. Bye.